Welcome into a special edition of the Commitment Issues podcast. I'm Woody Wommack, joined by Dave Lackford. Dave, how you doing?
Doing good.
And a special guest, National Basketball. What's your title, Bossi? National Director.
National Basketball Analyst.
Okay. You didn't throw in director like Farrell?
No.
Okay. National Recruiting Analyst Eric Bossi. We're here to talk about the documentary on HBO last night, The Scheme. We're going to talk with Bossi about that and ask some questions, stuff like that. But before, let's talk real fast. The NCAA extended the dead period through May 31st. Really killing basketball is a huge period for basketball, right? Because guys were supposed to be taking visits and stuff and wrapping it up.
Yeah, visits, spring visits for late signees or for all these grad transfers and transfers now that everyone's so hot on, we're hoping to take visits. And then also you've got the 2 live evaluation periods where guys could go out and watch players with their AAU teams the last 2 weekends in April. But I don't think anyone was expecting those to happen anyway. And I mean, I'll be pretty surprised if we even have July recruiting at the rate we're going.
So what's going to happen with these transfers? I mean, are there going to be some kids who end up going back where they came from or get lost in the shuffle or what?
There may be a few guys who go back where they came from. There's absolutely going to be some guys who are left out with nowhere to go because some schools are going to be like, all right, you're out of here. We need to fill your spots, and they may not be able to find somewhere. But basically, they're going to be making their decisions based off stuff like this. They're going to be getting on Zoom or FaceTime and doing virtual tours of places and calling up anyone they know who may have gone there or have experience with the coaches and making their decision that way versus getting to actually meet these guys in person.
That sounds horrible.
Thank God for the transfer portal.
Yeah. Well, it's actually, I'm surprised to see so many basketball guys still jumping in because I think a lot of football guys that would be transferring aren't because A, they didn't have spring practice to find out that they were falling down the depth chart, and B, they can't, like you said, they can't visit. They don't know what they're going to do.
Yeah, I think a lot of these guys, especially with the grad transfers, they want that chance to prove that they can play at the highest level and, maybe get a taste of the good life. They've been at these low major and mid-major programs with maybe limited budgets and travel difficulties and things like that. And they want to go kind of have, the big budget programs and things like that. And also, for some of these guys who just frankly like the attention of it all because they never got it the first time around and they want to kind of soak it all in. And I can't be mad at them. They did their thing. They gave you their 4 years. I'm not one of those guys who cries about transfers or thinks it's a big deal when guys transfer. I feel like they should be able to play wherever they want. So, if they want to use the system and maybe enjoy some attention out of it, I'm all for it. I mean, we're here to write about these guys and they're pretty friendly to us doing stories on them. So I'm not going to criticize them to make my job easier. And people like reading about it. And, we're here to get people to read articles. So, more power to them.
What about some of these schools? Like I saw Wichita. How many transfers has Wichita State had?
Yeah, so they've had by far the wildest spring of anyone. They've had 7 scholarship players and 1 walk-on transfer, so 8 transfers total. They had 1 kid signed from the spring. Last weekend, they had 4 kids commit in 24 hours. And the guy who was signed originally from the fall, Jaden Michael, who actually reclassified from 2021 to 2020 to go there, asked out of his letter of intent. So they had, replaced 5 of 8, but now they're back to only 4 of 8 being replaced so far.
It's crazy. There were 7 guys even that transferred out of 85 on a football team. There would be just the hand wringing on Twitter would be insane. Like,
yeah, well, I'm here locally in Kansas City, so between the Kansas fans and the Kansas State fans, there's some bad blood with the Wichita State fans, and the KU and K-State fans have certainly been talking some trash. And, of course, Wichita State fans say it's all the players' fault and things like that. As any fan base goes, if you're against that school, it's the school's fault. If you're for that school, it's the kid's fault, but it's certainly been a pretty wild deal. And I've never seen 7 guys choose to leave that quickly out of 13.
But there's no, I don't know. Did something happen that set it off, or is it just?
Who knows? One of the guys who left, Eric Stevenson, who's going to Washington, was pretty vocal and pretty critical of Greg Marshall and the staff. But I don't know. I don't think anyone could possibly watch Greg Marshall coach and not know what you're getting into. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
I don't have much sympathy for guys who go somewhere and get mad because a coach yelled at them. Well, you watch this guy yell at people on TV, or, you watch this guy coach a certain way. Like, what was the surprise to you? So it's just a weird deal. But, they've had some transfers there. I think something like this happens again next year, then yeah, absolutely, there's going to be some cause for concern, and certainly it's eyebrow raising. But it's also just as eyebrow raising to me that they've been able to fill some of these spots with pretty decent players as quickly as they have. It's clearly some kids don't care. They can't take visits, they can't do this, and clearly they don't care why these guys left. They're just excited, like, oh wow, well, Wichita State might have some playing time, so I'm going to go there.
Right. It's so funny, like what people think goes through the kid's head and what actually does. Like, I mean, uh, we're doing a commitment tomorrow that I filmed today with the kid, and I was like, "Oh, who are your finalists?" He's like, "I don't have any," and I was like, "So you just you just decided you're going to commit to this school?" He's like, "Yeah, I've been thinking about it. That's where I want to go." I'm like, "So you went from nothing to one in a second, and nothing's happened. The kid's been sitting at his house."
Pretty much just get bored, I guess.
Right. So we watched the scheme last night. Dave actually watched it twice, which was crazy. So to me, for those who don't know, if you didn't watch it, go watch it, I guess, if you got 2 hours to kill. Basically, this was, the story of the man behind this giant FBI investigation, which I thought was stupid the entire time it was happening. And I didn't really check into it to see why or what was going on. I knew it was bribery or whatever, but I mean, when it was laid out for me, it seemed even stupider than I thought. So, Bossi, you were kind of, you were dialed in when all this was going on. What was your take overall on the doc?
Yeah, we're talking about Christian Dawkins, obviously, because there's several aspects to the trial, and there were, a few different trials. So they just focused on his thing. And, for the people who don't know, Christian is a aspiring agent. He didn't like being called a runner in the doc, but that's absolutely what he was. He's done management, he's done all kinds of things. I remember him when he was coming up with the Dorian's Pride AAU team. He had guys like Kyle Kuzma, Josh Jackson, some pretty big name guys that were on the team that he kind of ran and got things going with. So he's been a mover and a shaker for a while, and obviously did some moving and shaking that raised some serious antennas with the FBI, and obviously ended up with him now sentenced to what I think is a year and a day in jail for wire fraud and all these things, and all this craziness with trying to get him to bribe coaches so that the coaches can use that money to pay players and this and that, and certainly a lot of stuff that I think the majority of our readers or anyone who would watch this podcast have a pretty good idea of some of the stuff that they at least think goes on with recruiting, whether it be in football, where it seems to be more of the old boot or handshake type cheating, whereas in basketball, it's more, at least theoretically, run by agents and financial advisors and shoe companies and stuff like that. But getting to see it and having a guy who can certainly spin a story like Christian can to tell it is certainly some compelling TV. But at least from my end, I don't think we learned anything out of it that hadn't already been heavily reported on by any means.
So to me, I don't know anything about Christian Dawkins, really. He just seemed to me like a handler who just kept moving up and up and up. I mean, he had the kids on the AAU team, right? Which, if you're translating to football, it's
You got some guys.
Right. Yeah. I got my guys I'm training or whatever. Then, he parlayed that into his deal with Andy Miller, who was did he get his agent thing like stripped because of all this?
It was first thing he did was he signed Peyton and the other kid that were Hood, Rodney Hood.
That's right. That's right.
So he was a kid. He was like under 20, and that's when another agency. I don't know if he was with an agency at that point in time, and then that put him on Andy Miller's radar because he was so young and he had 2 first-round draft picks signed with him. And so Andy used him as a runner, a go-between to go out and get the kids in the street level and bring them back. He was the recruiter. He was the bag man for Andy Miller.
And Andy Miller has been thought to be heavily involved in grassroots basketball for years and years and years and years. I mean, it's not much of a secret that there are a lot of agents that help out with funding summer teams, and with the hopes that it'll eventually come back around to get them players on the back end. And some of it's on the up and up, some of it isn't. We can only speculate, and I'm not a big speculator because speculating on stuff like that probably isn't the wisest thing in our positions. But clearly, I think Andy Miller was certainly someone that they wanted to get to. But I mean, other than kind of mentioning him as someone that Christian worked for early on, they left him out. No one really knows what's happened though. But I do believe he's been decertified as an agent.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because I remember him being having a lot of good guys in the NBA. But so, like, this is not. It's funny because I was watching it, and I was like, man, this guy Christian reminds me of this dude I know on the football side. And I was like, that's what he does, because I'm not really sure what his job is or who he works for, and he's always around. And now, it sort of makes sense on that end. But basically, so the FBI decides, hey, we want to make a big splash, apparently. Dave, you can talk about this. How did you think it's set up from the point of, okay, Christian was on their radar, like Bossi said, because he moved up real quickly and was around, some prominent guys. He had the Uber thing, which I want to talk a lot more about. But how do you think it happened that they ended up going to him? How was he the FBI target?
Well, I remember when all this broke, it wasn't all centered on Christian Dawkins. So with this documentary, you're just seeing Christian Dawkins' perspective of things, right? But when the investigation really started, it was supposed to be bigger than this. This was we got your playbook. We're about to bring down the NCAA. They wanted Sean Miller, Will Wade, and Rick Pitino, okay? So Louisville was already in the middle of a bunch of scandals. And what happened was this Marty Blazer guy starts ripping off his clients to make that trash Ving Rhames movie, right? So he's defrauding all these people with this money, and he's funneling it. He's misappropriating funds. And so the feds find out, and they get him. And here's how the feds work. What they do is they work their way up the chain. So they pop somebody who, isn't really that high profile, isn't that big of a deal. And then he starts talking about things that he knows, right? So that's called a proffer. So a proffer is, all right, you're charged with a crime. We're going to have a pre-trial conference. If you would like to come in and talk to us and give us some information, we'll be more than happy to listen to what you have to provide, right? So in order to get a deal, you have to give substantial assistance that leads to an arrest or conviction, whatever the prosecutors specify, okay? And then if they, very rarely do they allow you to operate the way that Blazer did as a confidential informant. Okay, so he says, I know this guy named Ganush or whatever his name was, who finances, these kind of dirty deals with big basketball players. And there's this other guy, Dawkins, and he's connected to all the coaches. So the FBI thing, and this is the Southern District of New York, right? So I'm a federal lawyer. I practice in the Eastern and the Western District of Kentucky. And, you aspire to get up there to New York because those are big time, 6-figure cases, right? I mean, we're talking, isn't that where, what's his name? Harvey Weinstein was, you got Martha Stewart, all the high profile cases, this one, they all come out of there. That's like the East Coast big time Hollywood Department of the United States prosecution wing. So they're like, that's big time. And yes, we'll work with you so you don't go to prison if you give us substantial assistance, right? So you see him in there in these videos. He's working in conjunction with the Jeff D'Angelo guy, who's the FBI agent who set all this up. So as time goes on, they get Dawkins to commit some crimes. I think that it was borderline entrapment. But ultimately they arrest Dawkins. They indict him with a laundry list of things. They're all trumped up, and they're in the hotel room saying, look, if you work with us, you won't go to jail. And he's like, I ain't gonna go to jail for behind this, am I? And they're like, well, the judge will decide that. He says, I want a lawyer. They arrest him. Then they have the press conference, and they come out there, and they're talking cash money stuff, right? They're out there like, we got your playbook. He was like, the madness that goes on in March extends well beyond the tournament. It's like some real corny puns. And prosecutors.
It was like a bad movie about recruiting.
It's awful.
That attorney was speaking.
It was no blue chips. But that's how prosecutors are, though. They're very dry. They're bureaucrats, right? So when they try to be funny, it's only funny to other prosecutors. Kind of like when head coaches think they're funny, it's only funny to other head coaches and stuff. So but here's the thing. Normally, people proffer. People will work with the feds because they're afraid of federal prison, because the way the feds get you is they sit back and they investigate. It's not like your state police where they see a crime happening and they're like, oh, we have to intervene in this before someone gets hurt. No, they're an investigation branch. They're not really like Crime Stoppers. They just sit back. They'll put their agents out there. They'll put their agents in the field to participate in the conspiracy in order to, be in the trenches with these people, so that they can testify. They've got the wires, they've got video camera, they get your phone, and next thing you know, you're screwed. You're nailed to the floor. Factually, you are screwed. And that's what Dawkins said in the documentary. His lawyer was like, I asked him, what if they have your cell phone? And he goes, well, then I'm effed, and he was, right? So now the feds are thinking, we got this dude. He's not a real criminal. We're going to scare him with federal penitentiary time, real life Fed time. And they trumped it up to where I think he said he was facing something like 60 some years, right? So the average Joe is going to cooperate, right? But Dawkins, at the end, the mom's reading the letter and he's like, I'm like Martin Luther King, Gandhi, I'm like Jay-Z, I'm Dick Clark. One of these is not like the other. But he said those people were revolutionary in their field. So he can't be revolutionary in his field if he brings the whole entire field down. I mean, if he testifies, you're bringing down this house of cards, right? Like the facade, he's just going to rip the facade off of the love of the game and amateurism. He's going to destroy all that. He can't, because that's what he wants to do. So he fights it. And the Fed's whole case falls apart right there, because without him, you can't get to the coaches. That's the way they set it up. That's why he was saying this business model that D'Angelo wanted to do made no sense, because I don't want to work with the coaches. I want to give the money to the kid. Kid goes to, wherever, Arizona, plays one semester and then goes pro. And then, I give him 50 grand and I get back 500K. And that's in the time span of 6 months. This ain't college football where you got to be removed from high school for 3 years. You only got to play a semester in college and you go. So he didn't like the coach thing, but they needed the coaches because that's bribery of a public official, because the coaches are public officials at these schools, right? So the way that they were thinking was, I'm going to get Dawkins on the hook, and then he's going to call these coaches, and then he's going to get them on these wiretaps, talking about money, talking about players, talking about arrangements, doing all these things. Then I go out, I indict them, I kick down Rick Pitino's door, drag him out in his underwear, and I perp walk him down to the Southern District in New York. I'm the man. I'm trying to set myself up for a federal judge. Federal judges are appointed and they get $100,000 for life, even after they retire. They're still making 6 figures a year, even when they're done. So those are the type of cases you want if you're a federal prosecutor, okay? So this is big time. All they got to do is get Christian Dawkins to flip. He is the bridge to getting Wade, Miller, and Pitino. The problem is he blows the whole thing up and says, no, I'm going to trial. I'm not going to proffer. I'm not going to cooperate. Had he cooperated, though, he gets on the stand. They introduce the phone taps through him. That's how they get that in the evidence. They play it, and then they say, elaborate on this. Oh, yeah, this was DeAndre Ayton. Sean Miller gave him $150,000. Will Wade wanted him, but I was, bidding against each other. And he just blows the whole thing up. And next thing you know, Will Wade and Rick Pitino and them are going to prison. Those are the guys they wanted. They couldn't get them because
he didn't snitch.
Christian Dawkins ain't no snitch.
Exactly. That's sort of the moral of the story from he's willing to go to jail for however long, 13 months or 18 months, whatever it was, or whatever. I think he's appealing.
Well, he's still on the hook for a year and a day. He's on appeal. They're going to lose those appeals.
Right. He's just kicking a can down the road. I found it interesting that the documentary didn't really include the shoe stuff. The only thing we saw was him and his boy at Adidas, which I laughed so hard when he was like, when Dawkins kept saying he doesn't want, he's like, I don't want to give the coaches money. Basically, he kept saying that over and over again. He's like, we don't need to do that. It's stupid. And right. then he calls his boy at Adidas. And he's like, look, they want to give money away. We're taking money.
Yeah. He said, if you want to be Santa Claus and just give people money, we might as well go to the strip club.
The guy at Adidas was like, so we're just going to take these fools' money then? And he was
Yep. Yeah. Yep. You couldn't get any of those guys in a documentary because they don't care. Like
Yeah,
Dawkins'
the
whole thing was
Adidas trial was a totally separate trial too, and the guys in the Adidas trial wouldn't roll on anyone either. So
And they got less time. They seem like they barely.
I thought they pled. Did they go to trial?
I know Jim Gatto got found guilty.
Yeah, so he went to trial too, right?
So
he didn't even get I know any time in federal prison.
Yeah, and from this stuff like
Gatto did. He got 9 months.
His time and is out and is back coaching youth basketball again and stuff. It's so hard. Like even for those of us who have followed it closely and know all these people in this thing, like keeping track of exactly who's been charged with what and what was actual evidence in trial, what wasn't evidence in trial, what was written in a Yahoo Sports article, what was written, what was Gary Parrish's opinion, what was Dick Vitale's opinion. There's so much going on that it's so hard to keep all together. But at least specifically to the scheme, we got to see one side of the story, at least based on his opinion on how things went, and it at least gives a little bit of a peeling back of the curtain into somehow this stuff may operate. But I think it's pretty clear at the end of the day that I don't think the big gotcha moment everyone wants to talk about is whether it be with Will Wade or Sean Miller. Well, does Arizona or LSU care? It doesn't appear to me that they do. And of course, Dave, you're an attorney, you can speak to this. Look, I get it. People who don't like Arizona basketball or who don't like LSU basketball are all going to say Sean Miller, Will Wade is dirty as hell. Right. People who like LSU basketball, like Arizona basketball, are all going to say, that didn't say anything we didn't already know. That doesn't prove anything. He could have just been, you're talking to a hustler, you hustle him back. He was just playing the game. It's plausible deniability on all this. And, if you look, but LSU released a statement today that basically said, yeah, we're aware of the documentary, but, big whoop. So, anyone looking for that gotcha moment or for these guys to lose their jobs, I don't think that's happening. And, that's a whole legal battle if they try and fire these guys over this. It's a big mess, and it's basically whichever side you want to believe, that's how you're going to believe it, and no one's going to be changing their mind.
Hey, Bill, those phone conversations between Wade and Dawkins, the attorney said they didn't get them in at trial. Is this the first time anyone's hearing those conversations?
I thought some of them had been in trial, but a lot of that stuff has been reported on before in news articles and stuff like that. So it's not anything that was new. This was nothing new.
Yeah, we saw like some preview articles where they had I definitely saw in the Arizona paper that was like, oh, his audio's out and it's not that bad or whatever. My take was, if you follow recruiting though, I think a lot of this, forget this FBI trial and all that stuff. It's actually not as bad as you think it is. The way the system worked and the way he talked about, like when he said how it works for him. Sorry. When he said how it works, when he was talking to coaches and he says, I don't need the coaches to give players money. That's how these guys are who work with football players too. They call the coach, and they also exaggerate their influence when he's like, I control high school kids, blah, blah, blah. Every blabbermouth handler's like, I sent Alabama 5 players. Nick Saban owes me, blah, blah, blah.
No. The number one mantra of a handler when he wants you to think he's the man is, I could basically walk up in there and run practice. When Dawkins said that, I was like, how many times have I heard that, man?
Right. It's like
how common is that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. When I come over there, I walk into Nick Saban's office, put my feet up on the table, blah, blah, blah.
Drink his peanuts. Drink his peanut Coke.
Peanut Coke. Talk about a Southern thing.
Well, but it's just like, so a lot of that stuff, if you like recruiting, you could take it away completely and say, look, okay, Dawkins was a runner for an agent or was trying to be a marketing guy or whatever, all that stuff.
Yeah, and he was good. He was really good at his job. There's no question about that. Like, to be as young as he was and the circles he was already moving in and the types of guys that he was able to get money out of. I mean, the dude was good. I mean, like I knew that he was getting into the music business, but I had no idea he'd secured like a record label while he's going through all this stuff. Like that's wild to me. Like,
dude, that guy, if like Jesus came back as a handler, it would have been in the form of Christian Dawkins. Man. He was 12 years old and created a website where coaches were paying $600 to read it and ranked himself the #1 player in Michigan. He was 12 years old and said, you know what, I can't play basketball too good, but I could get some money out of this. Like, that's my man.
We should have hired him when he was 13 to
I know, man.
Run a team site.
Him and Bill.
You keep calling Bossi Bill.
Eric, my bad. It's because it's Bossi. It's a B. It's
the kind of respect I carry around Rivals.com.
I'm a football guy, man. My bad, Eric. My bad.
Lackford's been known to get into the sauce a little bit.
No, I'm sober. I haven't been drinking all day. I messed around with some bourbon 2 days ago. I forgot I had to stick to beer, man. So I just killed the bourbon. I haven't had anything to drink in like 3 days now.
Well, it's tough on this quarantine life. But anyway, I think like it wasn't earth shattering. It probably should have been about an hour too. Like, I mean, honestly, it could have been 15 minutes on Real Sports or something with Brian Gumble. But like, it was gave us something to watch. But I think if you follow recruiting and you want to really know how it works, like, you know, how does the money get paid and stuff like that. Now, you know, like, it's not always the head coach of this, especially in football where there's more people around a program. The head coach has got plausible deniability at all times, you know, like they're not dealing with, you know, the Christian Dawkins of the football world is not talking to Dabo Sweeney, you know, it's just not how it works. So, and there's different access levels. Like, you know, they were in Vegas where it was all supposed to go down, Bossi, and they wanted the coaches to come in and stuff. I mean, it's so much.
Are they not talking to? Are they?
Well, some of them
I think the high level ones are talking to everybody. I mean, that's how Dawkins was in there because it's who do I talk to? Who's the guy? You know,
well, that's
do I win mom? Do I win dad? Do I win the AAU coach? You know what I mean? And some people are connected that way to where they find themselves slipping up the cracks. You know.
Well, that's one thing that stood out when he was talking to Sean Miller, and Sean Miller said, "Hey, do I need to talk to whoever or whoever?" Like that question, like whether that had anything to do with money, that gets asked of me when a coach calls me and said, who do I need to talk to? Who's running the recruitment, the mom or the high school coach or the uncle or whoever? Right. So those things gave people a window into recruiting that I don't think you would have gotten elsewhere. So other than that, I don't know if there's much to take away other than, Bossi, do you think he ever gets back into basketball? I mean, given the fact that he didn't snitch, I mean, I don't see why.
I've seen crazier things happen. You know what I mean? Like, nothing would surprise me. You know, I don't know why, unless there's some kind of law. You know, if he tried to go work for an agency or something, I would imagine that the NBA would probably frown on that a little bit, just considering all the heat he's brought and things like that. But you know. Nothing surprises me. You know, we see lots of people do stuff and get back into it. And, you know, if he does go to prison and he does serve his time, then, you know, he should be able to do whatever he wants. Now, obviously, I would think that you would think there'd be a lot of buyer beware in terms of anyone dealing with him. And certainly as soon as you Googled his name, a whole bunch of stuff would come up. And if you chose to deal with him, then, you know, obviously – there's a route that you seem to be wanting to go with things. But the thing is, you know, I do think these things always play. Yes, we all know there's cheating out there, you know, and I think Woody, Dave, you guys see this from message boards. 10 years ago, every school fan base used to be like, no, there's no way we cheat. We all do it the right way. Now, then it started turning into, oh, well, maybe we should cheat. And now there's a lot of, well, if we're not cheating, we should be doing it. You know, like, why aren't we doing it? But my point that I'm getting back to, which I guess I didn't even need to go into that, is that while there's certainly some cheating out there, I don't think it's quite as grand. It's not every single kid, okay? Not every single kid going to Arizona or Georgia or Texas or Tennessee or Duke or Kansas or Kentucky or wherever. Not every single kid going there is getting paid. not every kid going there is getting paid $100,000. Not every kid going there who maybe did get paid is getting paid in a way that people think that they're getting paid. You know, it could be a guy who's been taking care of their phone bill all these years and then has some sway with them. You know, there's varying levels of this, but it's certainly it's kind of an interesting look, at least how this one case of the kind of access that this guy really did have. You know, like certainly he's not running college basketball and recruiting like he was intimating, but he's got some juice too. Like, you know, the guy is connected with agents. He's connected with college coaches. He's connected with a lot of assistants. I mean, you saw, you know, he was just parading one guy after another through that hotel room. I think it was in the Cosmo in Las Vegas. They didn't say it in there, but I'm pretty sure it was in the Cosmo because that's where every coach hangs out in Las Vegas. So that would be the only logical spot to put it. But, you know, it is kind of eye-opening to see those guys coming through. But, you know, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but I like to be a professional body language judge sometimes. Like, seemed to me like every coach that went through there was laughing at those guys. Like, are you guys really this stupid? Like, this is how it's going to work out. And even you doctors like, don't touch it. I'll handle the money. I'll take it. We'll go down and we'll have fun. You know, like it was a joke to them, you know, and.
Well, the coaches don't need money. They're millionaires. They don't need 50 grand. What are they? Oh, yeah. Thanks, Christian Dawkins, for this $50,000. That was the other thing, was like, how clueless were the FBI people to go about this, you know, method? And he's like, I don't need the coaches. The coaches need me. Like, he kept like.
Right. Like what the FBI couldn't get to their skulls. And I understand because they had a specific case they're trying to make, is the coaches are going to be loyal to him because if he has control over a kid, he's theoretically going to be placing kids places. Right.
Right.
And so if the coaches don't take care of a kid in that situation and like try and keep the sharks at bay or keep the wolves from getting into the hen house, you know, at night, or the foxes into the hen house, and don't make sure that kid ends up back with that agent or runner, whoever we replace him with, well, they're not going to get guys from him anymore. And they're going to get blackballed by other runners too, because they're going to be like, well, we don't want to send our guys to this school because they're not going to protect them for us. So yeah, no, they don't need to be the ones to be paid. I'm sure if a school wants to get down, they would much rather it be someone than one of their employees paying the kid and taking care of him going there, you know, because then like they can truly say, I didn't know, I didn't pay this guy. So, exactly. You know, it's the thing that was wild to me was that he knew something didn't add up all the way along. And Christian's clearly a bright guy. But he wanted the money so bad. The thirst for that money won out over everything. And, you know, my mind was blown at the end when he was like, yeah, you know, I still had $90,000 of their money. That one, I don't know what the legal ramifications of that are, but I don't know if I'd gotten busted in an FBI sting and I realized that I had stolen money from the FBI, I probably wouldn't have bragged about it in the documentary.
It's over though. They already ran him through for all that stuff, for all the sequence of events, double jeopardy. They can't get him anymore.
Yeah, I guess you got a point. But I think the other funniest part was when he was talking about getting busted, and he said that he had stripped down to his jeans like an R&B singer. Like at that moment, I've got a bunch of videos running through my mind, and I'm just imagining Christian Dawkins in this thing like swinging a U-chain around his neck and doing like dance moves or singing like R. Kelly or something, because he painted such a great picture of it. I'm like, man, I would have been out, you know, like people could say what they want, but like you say, like, you know, people are going to mess with him when he gets clean of this stuff because they know he's not a rat.
Right.
You know?
But it's going to be hard to get a legitimate job.
And maybe in the music industry, that may help him out. I don't know. Cause I mean, if people think recruiting is dirty, you know, that's got nothing on the music industry. So, you know, it's an interesting thing. No bombshells. If you think everybody's dirty and you wanted your smoking gun, you got it. If you don't think anyone's dirty and you thought this was just a bunch of BS, you got that too. So it's basically whatever mindset you go into this with, you're going to leave out of it with the same thing. And, you know, that's why people get on me sometimes. Well, why don't you try to expose it or whatever? I'm like, well, it's not my job. You know, one, I'm not an investigative reporter, but two, you know, if I did that, half the people are going to hate me and half the people are going to love me, and I'm going to be nowhere. That's just not what I want to do. You know, like hey, God bless the people who do investigative journalism. It's not for me, but you're not going to change people's minds. If they think one way, they're going to think that way after, pretty much no matter what you say. So, that's why I'm not into a big, like, well, I think this or I think that about it. It was a couple hours of entertaining television. Arizona and LSU have clearly put their flag in the ground and stated how they feel about it. And, that's where we are with it.
You don't think there were shocking moments to people that aren't like us that cover this? I mean, not everyone is dialed in and is focused and in the ground as we are, like some people are sitting there like, wait, this is Sean Miller, the coach of the number one team in college basketball, talking to some 22-year-old handler about some offer for $125,000. I mean, to me, I didn't follow it that closely because I don't care about college basketball, and I was forced to listen to it because I live in Louisville, but I was shocked at that. I was like, man, how dumb is Sean Miller to be talking on the phone like that to somebody? Like that's a conversation you have outside, after you pat the guy down.
Right. Well, so here's how I look at that. You're right. You make a good point. There are a lot of people watching who don't know as much about it. Now, I'd say that the majority of their audience, at least on this first run, was people who do follow this stuff, and especially with no sports going on, like it's something people have been looking forward to for some time, right? But like to the average person who doesn't follow it or anything like that, yeah, it's a shock, but it's probably only a shock until the next thing they see on Twitter about something from a news conference about Corona that they either disagree or agree with has blown up on Twitter, and whatever they saw Sean Miller or Will Wade say the night before, it's only lasting in their mind for about 15 minutes. It's on to the next thing. So,
goldfish
if you can hook that group of people who doesn't really care and get them to care, then we're opening up an entire new conversation. But at the end of the day, the vast majority of supporters of Arizona athletics, which is who the Arizona AD cares about, who any school's AD cares about, are still supporting their guy. So he's still going to have a job unless something new came out that was just so astounding that there's no way to still defend him. But, as it is, they can still defend them. There's nothing in it that they didn't know was coming out. And, whether you agree with it or disagree with it, that's the deal. It's where we are.
I would personally, for me, I mean, we call them headset sniffers, the people who like deify these football coaches. If they could hear conversation, like if there was a wiretap like on, Christian Dawkins, the equivalent in football, and you could hear the coaches talking like you heard Miller and Wade, I mean, that'd be such a huge blow to football coach Twitter. I don't know if they could.
Yeah, it's look, anyone who's working in any form of business, coaches or salesmen, right? Salesmen have to cater to their audience, and they have to play the game with those guys. Sometimes they're really playing the game. Sometimes they're just playing the game on the phone and just BSing with the guy because, they don't want to be ruled out on the first phone call, right? So you got to like, oh, yeah, we'll do whatever it takes to get him. He's our guy. Whatever you need, we got you. Well, that can mean a lot of different things, right? And these guys are all pretty good about operating in that area. I'd say the only thing that maybe surprised me a little bit was like in the Will Wade audio, like Dawkins wasn't egging him on at all. He's just like, yeah, It's almost like, like, I don't know if Will was like, finally, I got someone I can get this off my chest to, or whatever the situation may have been.
He was selling. He was
to brag about it or what. And that was the only one that to me was like he didn't even have to be goaded into it or like walked into it. It's not like, hey, there's nobody who works in news anywhere that hasn't had to interview a guy and like to get something out of them, you even have to frame softballs almost so that you can get someone to repeat it back to you. Like, hey man, like you can really pressure the ball defensively and you get into passing lanes and you're able to ignite the break on the other end. That's kind of what you do, right? And the kid will say, yeah, I pressure the ball and I get into passing lanes and I start the fast break. And like, okay, I've got something. Like everyone has dealt with having to do that. But, that certainly was not the case in this thing. Like he was ready to talk and he probably said too much. Like, I mean, this isn't an ideal thing for LSU, certainly, or Will Wade. But, clearly it's not something they think they can't recover from because they've kept him and he's continued to recruit just fine. So it's certainly kids don't care. The parents or coaches of kids sending guys, those guys don't care. And at the end of the day, if you're a school and you're a fan base and you're a coach, like it's not impacting the bottom line and being able to operate your program, then clearly it's business as usual. And, maybe that eventually opens up an entirely new discussion of, hey, we need to just say to hell with it and get these kids paid, which I'm pretty sure everyone on this call would agree with all that.
Yeah.
But they'll still be cheating even if it's legal to pay kids, because they'll always, no matter what rules you set, people are going to find a way to cheat around it. I mean, that's just a fact of every walk of life. That could be on the stock market, that could be in law, that could be in, recruiting guys for Apple or Microsoft or whatever. That's just the way it is. But, certainly things like this, if anything, things like this do help to move the conversation along of, why are we treating these guys as amateurs when it's more and more clear that, calling them amateurs is a joke.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think we all probably wanted a little more. Like I saw some people on Twitter was like, "This is a waste of time." It's like, well, then shut it off. I don't. No one's making you watch
holding a gun to your head, making you watch it.
Woody has all the answers, man.
Hey, you're entitled to your opinion. Say, hey, I feel like once you say it's a waste of time and you thought it was a waste, then you made your point. What else do you need to discuss about it?
Right.
I don't need a 30 tweet string from you telling me why it was a waste of time. You told me it was a waste of time. I know your opinion on it. So what are we talking here about? Because what, ultimately this waste of time won. It's kind of like when we talk about in the rankings. Who complains the most about rankings? The people
that say they don't matter.
So they don't matter so much that all you do is talk about them, right? So
it's vortex.
Funny when you see that kind of stuff.
All right. Well,
for sure.
Bossi, we really enjoyed having you on to talk about this. Hopefully we'll have you on in the future because we got nothing to really talk about. So we're going to be doing some movies or TV shows or whatever as we did the Tiger King the other day.
I wish I could have been on for that.
Yeah, we got some really good feedback that people liked Dave's legal analysis about, why the Tiger King went down.
He got set up too.
Yeah.
I really do think he would have killed her if he could. So, he didn't need much nudging.
Well, she's getting a bad end of it now because Twitter's on, social media is on her.
Even O.J. Simpson's on her.
Wow. Hey, remember when we were talking about the Tiger King and you're like, how can they convict him when they put those non-credible witnesses on the stand? But look what happened to Christian Dawkins' thing. They didn't put the lead FBI investigator on the stand. They determined that Marty Blazer was more credible, and they convicted him with Marty Blazer, who the whole thing was started by because he was about to go to prison, and he said, no, don't put me in prison. I can help you put other people in prison. So I'm telling you,
I can get you
witnesses on the stand.
So also, Bossi, we talked about on that podcast about how my Uncle Fred had a pet bobcat when I was a kid, and my mom wouldn't let me go over there. And then I was reminded after we recorded the episode that when I was a baby, that my parents had a pet wolf.
Wow.
And they got rid of it after it bit me on the arm when I was a kid.
How did you forgot the lead? You didn't bury it. You just totally forgot it because that's how chaotic your life is.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's funny because we've seen wolves a couple times driving down the street, and I've always told my youngest daughter that if she can catch the wolf, we can keep it for a pet. And here you are, you're the lucky kid who actually had a wolf for a pet.
Right. You want to know what it was named? Wolfie.
You look like a wolf right now.
Oh man, Wolfie.
I'm gonna tell you guys my Uncle John's the name of his dog, which I cannot say on this show, but it's very funny. Well, I'll tell you guys about that.
It's the Woody Wommack Family Hour. And can we get a shout out to, we're talking about all this like paying players, and just shout out to the OGs who see Eric's background and know who that is. I know who it is because I'm from across the bridge over there. But
I had to come up with. For those who know, it's DeJuan Wagner, who is my favorite high school basketball player of all time, and his son DeJuan Jr. is currently probably the number one player in the freshman class in the country, which is pretty wild for me because DeJuan was a senior when I first started doing this, and now I'm talking about we're going to be maybe ranking his kid number one in the country. So, had to show a little love to one of the guys who was around when I very first started.
DeJuan actually made me some money too because he was playing for the Cavs in that NBA Summer League in Orlando, and I was getting that freelance cash for the plain dealer or whatever the newspaper.
It all comes full circle.
That's right. All right, guys. Well, thanks for hanging out. Reminder, you can watch the show on YouTube now. Of course, find us on iTunes, and we're going to probably promote this a little better than the last one. So you can follow Bossi on Twitter at eBossHoops. Dave is at Rivals Dave, and I'm at Rivals Woody. So it's real simple. Leave us a review on iTunes, and thanks for watching and listening.